It is time. Welcome to today's masterclass on architecting a global support organization, brought to you by CCW Digital Language IO and featuring support from Brand Data. We're going to be really looking at AI language in the bottom line, really identifying why multilingual CX is the next competitive edge and what should be an absolutely fantastic session. It should be one that takes your organization to the next level, helps you do what you need to do in a world where AI is playing such a role, and gives you everything you need to better connect with your customers, better understand them, and really elevate to the next direction. Now, I'm Brian Cantor, Principal Analyst for CCW, and I'm thrilled to be joining you today. When we think about all the trends and concepts in the customer experience, whether they're reducing effort or personalization or anticipating needs or honoring channel preference, they all ultimately come down to one concept. Customers want to be understood. They want to be valued. They want to be respected. They want to be heard. That reality is non-negotiable. It doesn't go away just because our world is becoming more automated and driven by AI. If anything, it's more important than ever, because it's how a brand shows you that even as it uses technology, even as in some respects the human touch goes away, we're not losing the human centricity behind our experiences. We're not losing that passion for connecting and understanding. Now, unfortunately, while this is important to show, many brands right now are not showing it. In fact, customers from our most recent consumer preferences survey say that difficulty explaining their issue is actually the #1 reason they're rejecting self-service. They do not feel like when they interact with an AI agent or a bot or an intelligent IVR, they can properly articulate their issue in natural language, that they feel as if the response understands them. And when that understanding breaks down, so too does your chance to build customer loyalty. So why is this happening? And what role can AI play in fixing it? More importantly, what is fixing it going to mean for our overall business, for overall customer experience, for our overall ability to cultivate trusting customers? We're going to be answering these questions and more in today's masterclass, which is designed to empower you to not only learn some research and learn about some new technology, but also take action when it comes to making every touch point a more conversational, more customer-centric, and more empathetic one. And as a sign of your quest to improve, you'll receive a certificate at the end of this discussion. Now, as a reminder, we are truly live, so you can ask questions of our speakers at any time. And we also have a live chat room for some interactivity. Now, I want to make one note here. The video window was a little large when I first set up the console. So if you're having trouble seeing the video or slides, please quickly refresh. And that will make sure that you can see everything smoothly, because we have a lot of great content. We have a lot of great speakers, a lot of great action as we dive into this masterclass. Without further ado, I want to take a second to introduce our speakers here. So I've worked with her before. She's so knowledgeable, so passionate when it comes to elevating customer understanding. Sheridan, that's you from Language IO. Tell us about yourself and your organization.
Thank you so much, Brian. I'm Sheridan Orr. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer from Language IO, and I'm very poor at languages, so I'm super excited that we have technology to make it so that I can speak 155 languages. We work with some of the largest companies in the world to help them take their customer experience global and make sure that they can support their customers wherever they are. And we're going to talk quite a bit about that. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, you might not know a lot of different languages, but you're very good at the languages you do know. You always share so many articulate insights, so much of a great perspective, and we can't wait to have you kind of share those insights throughout the discussion. But we're going to have to wait a little bit because we also have to meet Josh here from Brand Data. So thrilled to have Josh here. You know, it's great to have not only the perspective of someone who's working on the technology and working with clients, but also someone who's really listening to what the industry is saying, what customers are saying, what businesses are saying, because at the end of the day, we could have the coolest tech, we could have the catchiest buzzwords, but if we don't know what's going to resonate with customers, if we don't know what's going to work for businesses, none of it matters. And so, Josh, thrilled to have your perspective again. Tell us about yourself and your organization.
Thanks, Brian. Hey, everybody. I'm Josh Broughton, the founder and principal consultant here at Brand Data. We help measure and grow brands. We've worked with hundreds of brands over the last 8 years, and we specialize in brand research and consumer insights that help brands form strategies that win.
Awesome. Well, again, thrilled to have you. Thrilled to have Language IO and Brand Data joining us today. When it comes to being on the cutting edge of what works, when it comes to connecting with customers, there's no one I'd rather have here. So let's dive into the content. So this is going to be an option for everyone to fill out in the chat. We are going to have some polls. We'll make it, more dynamic where you get to press buttons in a little bit. But for now, we want to leave it open-ended. So feel free in the chat to put in any challenges you're facing right now embracing AI for language tasks? And, one that I think, certainly, is, and we're definitely going to walk into if we don't see any in the chat. Hopefully people won't be shy. But if not, one that we definitely are seeing come up quite a bit is this notion that, are we thinking about elevating the conversation to the right standard? I think that ultimately, if we treat AI, if we treat customer-facing engagement as an FAQ page, then yeah, you can run that through a simplistic translation and suddenly everything's going to work well. But as we know, customers are looking for more personalization, more conversational experiences. That's going to lead for a chance to, really emphasize more of that humanity. And Sheridan, I saw you put that in the chat as well. This notion that it has to feel like a real dynamic interaction. It can't just be technically accurate phrasing, because they don't need to interact with an AI tool for that. They don't need to interact with your business for what's written out there. When they want to engage, when they want to interact, that's really when it comes down to actually ensuring we have a conversational experience. So that's definitely one that, will come up. Guess people are being a little bit shy, hopefully, as they see us, kind of share data and make our way through the conversation. We'll get some more input. But I do want to dive in because we have a lot of data to really walk through for this conversation. And the first is really articulating why this is all relevant, what we're talking about here, why it's so essential to start to think about elevating communication. And that's really starting with what customers want. So they're looking for service on their own terms. We know that they're looking for the channels they want to use, the times they want to use, the way they want to communicate. And when they do so, they want the information to be clear, they want it to be accurate, and they want it to be natural. As I referenced earlier, the number one reason customers reject automated interactions is because they feel like it's not easy. This technology that we deployed for the sake of making it more convenient, more accessible, becomes a burden for them. They have to struggle to explain what they want. And at a certain point, I don't want to struggle anymore. I'm going to press 0. I'm going to yell for the representative. I'm going to type in that I want to speak to the agent. And all that happens there, the customer feels ignored because we didn't solve the problem in their channel. And the business is overrun with inefficiencies, extra costs, extra challenges, resource limitations. We don't advance in the right direction. Additionally, we lose access to the intelligence, right? Because if customers can't communicate how they want, then how do we know how they phrase these issues? How do we know how to improve our menus, improve our navigation moving forward? And so just some stats really showing the miss here. Right now, only 22% of customers say that they can choose how to interact with a business. And, again, that means that, they're feeling as if experiences are being imposed upon them, not accommodating them. And that instantly breaks that illusion of understanding. We also know right now that 75% of customers say experiences are too slow. 90% have to repeat themselves. So again, as they're progressing, it's not, here's my problem and I get a solution. It's, here's my problem. Wait, you didn't understand my problem. Let me try it again. You still didn't understand it. Let me try it a third time. I'm going to give up. I'm going to escalate to a live agent. And then that live agent has to start from scratch. Maybe they don't understand it either. And suddenly you are running into so much repetition, so much friction, so much effort. You don't feel like you're getting what you want out of the experience. And so you put all these together, these challenges, these stats, these pain points, and you see that right now self-service adoption is not where it needs to be. The overwhelming majority of customer service leaders still say their employees are spending too much time speaking to simple issues and dealing with low value work. We know that, of course, this directly impacts the agent. Not only does the agent, get distracted and kind of overrun with these like repetitive low value inquiries, but because they don't have the conversational context that would have come from firmer understanding with the AI powered tool, they now have to ask more qualification questions. They can't advance to the next phase of that journey faster, which means they're going to be not only dealing with low value work, they're going to be worse at that low value work, which hurts productivity. We also know customer trust erodes. So again, beyond the inefficiency, like obviously if you're making a customer repeat themselves, you don't show a lot of respect for their time. And that certainly doesn't go a long way in building the relationship. But the other challenge is if the customers keep explaining themselves, they're not really sure the bot gets what they're saying. They don't feel very kind of understood there. What's going to happen is they're not going to feel much confidence in the answer they get, in the outcome they're looking for. They don't feel like they can trust the channel that they're working with. And ultimately, this leads to negative perception of the experience, negative perception of the brand, and sort of a crack on the revenue you're looking to generate. So really, as we look at AI, we really have to be very mindful of, are we deploying AI in a way that addresses these challenges or exacerbates them? And it turns out that if we want to be able to address it, number one, we have to make self-service conversational. This means that customers have to be able to engage in their natural language and their preferred language. So not only do they have to be able to speak like humans, they have to speak like a human from where they're from and be able to be understood that way. And if we can't do that, it instantly creates inefficiency. It creates a breakdown in trust. It doesn't quite work. We also know that many believe that self-service has to deliver the same outcome as a live agent. So this is one of the things that really puts pressure on you to make sure that your self-service experience comes across as really human and really engaging with the customer, because what we don't want to have happen is, I know if I use the chatbot, I get the generic "thanks for your feedback, we'll do better next time." If I call the agent, I get the make good and the coupon and the apology. Well, what am I going to choose as a rational customer, right? And if that's my logic, then you're not going to get any of the efficiency benefits. You're not going to be omni-channel. You're not going to be empowering me to go where I want to go. And so ultimately, we have to make it clear that self-service is not a downgrade. It's a change. It's a different venue. It's a different way of interacting, but it's not a lesser way of interacting. And then ultimately, self-service is here to stay. We know 70% say it needs to play a considerable role in their support process. More and more brands are starting, if not completely requiring customers to use self-service platforms. So Corey, the tech has to be where it needs to go. And so ultimately, this means that AI cannot be a fancy FAQ page. It can't be a routing tool. It can't be a generic information dump. It needs to be a gateway to a better experience. It needs to be a gateway to hearing, listening, and solving problems for your customers. And we're going to talk into how we get there, what are some other factors that are preventing us from getting there, and what success looks like in practice over the course of this webinar. So like we said, we're really going to learn on ultimately why self-service needs to be natural. We're going to look at what's preventing that natural thing from happening, because let's face it, the tech is out there. You know, you probably interact with an AI tool in your own life and are blown away by how well it understands the questions you're asking. So why does it fall short from a customer service perspective? We also want to look at how we can actually fix these challenges and why we fix them by virtue of the great outcomes that we see. And so certainly a lot to share here. And what I love here is that we're going to start and really root this in a very powerful survey that Language.io and Brand Data did together to really look at, you know, what is happening in the customer experience space, what is happening when it comes to understanding customers, and what we can do better. So Josh, I know you spent a lot of time, really did the research correctly, have a lot to share. So I'm going to give you the stage right now for that.
Yeah, sure. So we'll set this up a little bit. Oftentimes people are saying, show me the data, but also tell me how you did it so I can understand the perspective there. So we took a look at around 1,100 business leaders, and we focused on a sampling from North America and EMEA in 5 different countries. We screened by enterprise companies with 5,000 employees or more, global footprint, and multilingual operations. And this spanned different industries from healthcare to gaming to technology and everything in between. And as a result, we got about a 2% margin of error plus or minus on our responses, 90% confidence level. So a good amount of rigor, especially for a marketing study, and found some really interesting things that helped drive some of the key points that we're bringing here to you today. And to just summarize some of the key findings, and we're going to unpack these a little bit more throughout the next several minutes. First and foremost, when it comes to AI adoption, especially with language, accuracy is cited as that #1 concern. And the accuracy spans different concepts too, right? Is it accurate from a cultural perspective? Is it accurate from a corporate perspective? Is it accurate from a brand perspective? Different forms of accuracy all add up to become that #1 concern in adopting AI. We also found that across the organization, when it comes to language issues or barriers, customer support is always the most negatively impacted. You know, within your internal organization, there is obviously issues and struggles with language, but those can often be overcome by policies, training, that kind of stuff. We don't expect our customers to go through that. They just want a great customer experience. And so it's the first point that gets negatively impacted and most negatively impacted. And lastly, we found that real-time translation is seen as probably the most solvable challenge with AI. Such a breakthrough technology, and the ability for it to take what somebody says and turn it into something of value almost instantly, that is a huge, huge, huge opportunity that represents just a giant sea change in how we provide support to our customers. And so the implications are so clear. First, poor translation, it absolutely leads to real business costs. It's going to lead to churn, miscommunication, delays. All of these things add up, and frankly, for most organizations, when it comes to language, the KPIs aren't granular enough to see how big of an issue this is. And so we're trying to get the word out today that a multilingual strategy is so very closely associated with retention and customer experience outcomes. And that's something that we're trying to advocate for, especially based on the results of this study. And so I think next, I think we're going to kind of unpack some of the results, but we'd like to hear what you think too.
Yeah, great point. Great points there, Josh. And again, I think that last point is one that should resonate, which is that this is solvable. You know, the truth is we all have our wish lists of everything we wish could be automated, everything we wish could make our contact centers or our customer support functions, or really just our businesses more efficient. But figuring out what we can do that will not only be addressable, but have a meaningful impact, that's really where language starts to come into play. And so as we start to walk through some of those recommendations there, you should be able to see a poll right now on the screen. So again, make sure that you are filling those out. We're not seeing a ton of responses. Like I said, if you do need to refresh to make sure you're seeing the poll, please do so, because it should be showing up in the slide window. We definitely want to get your thoughts before we then share sort of what the data shows and see how aligned or misaligned you are with the many thought leaders and many business leaders that Josh and his team surveyed. And yeah, so we'll give you a few more minutes here. And yeah, right now we're looking at the language challenges that AI could help your company solve. And again, knowing how many challenges there are out there, we certainly expect to see some of these, come up. All right, I'm going to move to the next slide just so we can go to this next. So right here, we're seeing, some data on, real-time translation seems to be the priority here. So really making those conversations happen faster. And I think that's, we just saw this, right? I mean, we just saw Apple, really emphasize real-time translation as part of its new AirPods. We know, obviously some will argue that tech's been around long before the AirPods, but the point is this is neither a pro-Apple nor anti-Apple session. What it is showing that when you think about what consumers are looking for, they want to be understood in their language, on their terms, and certainly translation comes into play. Josh or Sheridan, I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on this one.
I mean, it's definitely supported by the data that we saw. Real time is a huge opportunity. There's opportunities and there's challenges, right? What we saw in the survey data was that accuracy was one of the larger challenges, but when it came to opportunities, real time and faster translation definitely was number one on the list.
Yeah, I agree. One of the taglines we've been using right now is breaking barriers and not connections. And language is really the foremost connection you have with other humans. And so the more we can do to facilitate that easily and fluently is really going to make our businesses stronger and those connections we have with our customers stronger.
I see input from some of our viewers too, with expanded language coverage and automating tasks as being important as well. Definitely within the bullseye as well there. All kind of things that are of interest right now and represent huge opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. These are definitely going to be very, very helpful for walking through. So I think it's really clear to make sure that we're understanding how we're scaling our ability to accommodate different customers. And I think that business specific term thing is so key. I mean, we know that especially when the stakes are high, right? The higher the stakes, the more you're going to have very specific jargon where it means something. And the more you have to make sure that you're not getting it close, you have to be 100% right. So excellent points there. So wanted to get to this next one. So how does multilingual strategy factor into your overall business goals here? So when you think of the goals that you're trying to achieve, what are some of those and what ultimately are they, what are priorities for you? So feel free to put these in here and we'll kind of get a sense of how much of a priority these are for our audience members. I'd hope that it's, not zero if you're here in this webinar, but that was me biasing the data and probably violating a lot of data principles with that, but certainly curious to see what people say for this one.
Well, while they're answering, I've gotten to do a couple of brand and market studies with Josh, and he does not like it when you mess with his data.
I appreciate the support there, Sheridan, for sure, right? We want to have a clean look at things, for sure.
So we have some here, so I'm going to move to the next slide real quickly. So, well, that's, I guess whether we blame me for biasing or people are just all aligned, I think, almost everyone here said critical or important. So that does show that these are really powerful. And again, not only did I bias it with my comment a second ago, but we shared the data showing just how important understanding is. I mean, Josh, your look at accuracy being a major driver of success in these platforms, us showing that the number one deterrent of using platforms is the inability to have a clear and effective and well understood conversation. And so when you put those findings together, it really shows you just how important it is that if we're trying to elevate our customer experience, if we're trying to show that we accommodate customers, that we hear them, that we listen to them, then we can't make multilingual strategy anything other than a top priority. Any thoughts from our other panelists here?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think really the information that we're getting from our respondents here and our viewers, it just goes to show that this group is a true group of thought leaders and advocates. As we look at the actual data, we saw about 46% of our respondents said that it was important, and only 18% said it was critical. So there's definitely a gap between kind of the general enterprise level corporate world and how they're responding and how the people on this call and this webinar view it as well. And so I think that's just a vote of kudos to everybody who's watching here today, because you are onto something, and it's something that we can help you maybe with the information from this webinar become stronger champions for multilingual strategy within your own company.
Yeah, and we see the data from Josh's team here, and I think the main thing is that it was just flipped a little bit, that our audience sees it as even more critical, which is really exciting for us because we still have another 30 to 40 minutes of content, and knowing that, you really want to take it to the next level and it's a critical priority is so important. Sheridan, any thoughts here before we move on to the last of our polls here?
No, I think we've all been talking about, like, to grow your business, you really have to think globally. And now we can really make sure that we are having multilingual strategies to service those customers into those new markets that we're expanding into and provide a consistent global experience. And I think that's why probably this group which is way more customer facing, feels it more acutely.
For sure. Yeah, no, I think that's such an important take. So I'm going to pull back to our lack of, actually skipped it for a second. So I want to get back to this last poll here, and should be right here. So yeah, I'm not sure where that other poll went. Seems to be a glitch, but I'll try to pull that up in a second. So I do want to get into some strategic recommendations here. So Sheridan, not sure if you want to take the lead here, or Josh, or as we move into what we can do with all this to make it all worthwhile.
I'm happy to, but I always appreciate help from either of you. But your language and how you communicate with customers is really the language of your brand, and it is a strategic asset. And as we talked about, brand terms were really important. I think, Debbie, you had something to say about that. That is the language of your relationship with your customer, and I don't think it should be created as just a support tool. And that's one reason I'm on this webinar and not our esteemed Chief Customer Officer, Melanie Keith, is because language is part of your brand, and brand is the relationship you have with your customers. And that multilingual strategy should be critical to your core business planning, and to make sure that you are thinking globally and not just, how do you tap into new markets, but how do you service those markets? How do you make your brand feel relevant in those markets? And, now the technology is caught up. There is enterprise grade AI driven solutions, and they're very accurate. In fact, we often tell this story, and it is behind the scenes, so I do tell secrets out of school. But we had a customer who had some severe issues in one of their EMEA offices, and it was a German office, and their agents were unable to answer the phone during that period or deal with chats. And we were able to service all those customers in German, in their native language, with the English speaking agents. And there were 0 complaints, and no customers felt that change. So enterprise grade AI driven solutions can provide the accuracy, fluency, and human types of conversations that you hope to have with your customers. And those deliver real business outcomes. I mean, they don't just affect CSAT, they affect how your customers are retained, how efficiently you can serve them, and ultimately their loyalty to you and the brand. and we're going to talk about some case studies in a few minutes, but making sure that you can grow into those new markets and service new products in new markets with complete confidence and expand in a way that makes sense and be able to provide that experience that you all are so lauded for across multiple products and countries and brands. So, Josh, Brian, anything that you would add to that?
Yeah, I think your third point about just enterprise grade AI driven solutions driving accuracy and compliance. I think this brings up a real buy or build conversation that I've been seeing a lot with clients that are considering AI solutions. And the reality is that when it comes to international multilingual enterprise and proprietary data for companies, it ends up being a lot to try to build. And so it's really, I think, more of an efficiency thing to be able to trust a service provider who has thought about all of these things, who has made it scalable, and who can work on just those use cases that matter most. Within this particular realm of language translation, that is something that we've seen people leapfrog others who are trying to build something with an LLM or an orchestration platform like LangGraph or some of those other kind of like box of toys kind of approaches that people are taking these days. So I think that was just something that you said, Sheridan, that I feel is resonating outside of this webinar from what I've seen quite a bit.
I love that, Josh. Thank you. And our CEO, Heather Schumacher, who is a linguist, but also a technologist, and she founded Language.io. And one of the things that we just recently did is we posted a blog, and I'll make sure that we send that to all of you, that mistranslations can cost you $1 million a year, not only in hold time and customer churn, but really in just, that customer frustration and the time that they have to spend with your team to resolve issues. So, I mean, when you were thinking about implementing a multilingual solution, you want it from somebody who understands language, not just technology. So,
yeah, I think, and why that's such a great point, Sheridan, is that this is an interesting finding. So we had found when we did an AI survey earlier this year of business leaders that we looked at sort of like what were some of the unexpected things that they learned. And actually, a good amount were actually happy with the accuracy. So, we often talk about, when you go to AI webinars or read AI white papers, it's all about hallucinations and risks and all that. We found like a good amount were actually pretty comfortable. They were more trusting, felt like their AI-based communication was getting more accurate. But then when we looked at some of the top pain points, more than half said they experienced notable accuracy issues. So what that was essentially showing us is that it's not that everyone suddenly was like lying or contradicting themselves. They were essentially saying that AI is so inconsequential, like automated self-service engagement, that if there's a few minor accuracy issues, it's not the end of the world. Well, if we're talking about more and more businesses making AI their front line, where this is like we said, the majority of businesses are saying it is a requirement for customers to engage in self-service, and they don't actually get an accurate experience. That's the same as having a live human agent go out there and share a lot of nonsense saying, Jim, he lies once or twice a day. It's not the end of the world. You would never do that. The truth is we recognize the stakes of what AI-based communication is going to look like. You have to be taking the language part much more seriously. It can't be close enough. It has to be very much on point, very much aligned with what your business needs, very much aligned with who your customers are. The other point, Sheridan, that I like that you brought up was tying it to business objectives. We look at why are we doing this? We're not just doing it because, of course, things need to be translated just for translation's sake. We're doing it because we know that this is increasingly being our main touch point with customers. This is how we're going to demonstrate our brand values. This is how we're going to promote new products. This is how we're going to solve problems. This is how we're going to create loyalists. And if you don't hold the quality of your communication accountable for those ends, you're never going to be thinking, how can we make this better? How can we make it more intelligible? How can we make it more customer centric? So excellent points, but we could talk all about the good stuff. We also know there's going to be some things that stand in the way. So I know you've already on this slide. I want to give you a chance to walk through some of the obstacles.
No, I think that we've really talked about the language barriers already. And think about the last time that you had to call customer support. I travel a lot for business. There's nothing worse than being trapped in the airport and not being able to get support in that language. Like you're traveling to Vietnam, all of a sudden you are routed to all of the Vietnamese agents, and you really can't get your issue resolved. And with AI and CX together, you can really open up those borders. I don't know, by the way, did anybody, is anybody else a TikTok fan? Feel free to pop it in the chat. My new favorite obsession is those two young ladies that thought they were going to Nice and they ended up in Tunis. And it's just really, really interesting about how even saying the same words can, you can end up in a completely different place. But, you know, global team gaps, you want to make sure you have full coverage of language support. So you want to make sure that each region feels like that they are getting the adequate support. And one of the main reasons that customers turn to us is that they want to be able to even out their support and make sure that, you know, they can do their follow the sun model, but support all languages at all times. And with this, with Language IO, you can actually make sure that you're supporting all 155 languages at any given time with any given agent. This is one I really want to focus on is the poor translations. They really do have real cost. I talked about that study we did where, you know, mistranslation, if, you know, 30% of your translated messages have challenges, I mean, that's real dollars to your business, and you want to make sure that you are managing that effectively. And I know many of you probably saw the AI study with MIT, and they said, oh, you know what, most agentic AI projects fail. But there are adoption hurdles, but, you know, making sure your operations are seamless and clean before you put AI on it is really important. And that's something that we have a lot of expertise in because we do work with some of, you know, the Fortune 100 clients and can make sure that you don't have those hurdles and are appropriately onboarded. Our security is something we're super proud of, and accuracy is another one. And then, you know, there's no shortage of your customers demanding real-time support from you. I know Brian talked quite a bit about the self-service options. We have real-time options too. We were talking about chat, but also we have a new voice offering, which is very elegant. I invite you to schedule some time with us and see it just for your own curiosity. It is really, really fantastic. So anything that you would add here, Brian or Josh?
Well, I'm just going to jump in with one thing. I'm legally not permitted to stay silent. I always like the chance to talk. But one thing I will definitely say here is that the voice is a real strong opportunity. In fact, we have very promising data around voice AI where a non-trivial number of customers actually say they've had better experiences with voice AI than recent live human conversations. And so, you know, again, there's a lot of promise if we're trying to extend self-service, if we're trying to scale our support operations. There's a lot of problems with voice AI, but one of the reasons people like voice AI is because it's so fundamentally conversational. And if it's going to be fundamentally conversational, then that really raises the stakes of having very accurate communication, very strong translation, and a very clear sense of what does the customer want this conversation to sound like.
Yeah, and our voice, go ahead, Josh.
Oh, no, please, Sheridan.
No, I was just going to say, like, our voice AI is human to human across multiple languages. So you could do both, and you can do them both very elegantly. Go ahead, Josh.
Sure. And I was just going to say, too, like, you know, you mentioned the MIT study where most AI investments haven't provided a positive ROI at this point for investors. And I think that's just another nod for looking for a partner who's kind of gone through the R&D loop already. I think the idea that, you know, Language IO is founded by a linguist, is focused on use cases that matter to customer experience. Imagine you could kind of get all of the fruits of AI without having to make that costly investment in the research and development. I think that's kind of the interesting part about the AI adoption cycle right now is that, you know, we're kind of in that we had the peak of heightened expectations about a year and a half ago. And, really we've been in this trough of disillusionment in terms of the hype cycle adoption, in the sense that it's not delivering everything that we want it to in a lot of different domains and disciplines. But there are some companies and some partners that have reached that plateau, or that productivity plateau, which is really exciting, because AI absolutely is the future. And for you to be able to get a positive ROI on those types of investments by working with a partner is just a shortcut to not having to try to build everything in-house.
And in fact, I think, Josh, that wasn't just even a theory. I believe that's even in the data too, right? Is that it shows that the data, the 95% figure was dragged down by in-house builds providing comparatively less ROI or less upfront success than those built by those who are really well-versed in AI. So concur with everything you said there, that you want to have, especially when you're talking about critical use cases like language. This isn't just like, oh, like let me map some workflow around. Like you either get it right or you don't. And I think you really want to have people who are going to help you get it right.
I love that. And, now we've talked a little bit about, what are the opportunities with AI in the technology and why you need to look for accuracy and fluency and all of those things. But why would you do it? And I want to share some stories of why our customers have come to us and what they were trying to achieve with multilingual translation. The first was consolidation. We talked a little bit about making sure that your team can support any customer, traveler, patient, etc., in their native language at any given time. We are starting to see a lot of consolidation where CX leaders like yourselves are taking their operations and putting them in central locations versus having a lot of multiple offices around the globe, but maybe even consolidating. I know we have one that has done that in Romania, one has done it in Mexico, and they are running 3 shifts, and all of the agents that they hire there can support their customers globally, or maybe they have 1 or 2 global contact centers and they can service any customer from there. And that saves you so much money on recruiting, training, just the facilities that you need to have. And it makes you able to really consolidate a lot of those operations so you can unify tools and really reduce cost. And so we're seeing a ton of that go on right now. Certainly one of the campaigns I absolutely hate to do, because I feel like I've done it like 10 times since 2000, is the do more with less. But this really is an opportunity to do more with less and to find those savings and really create a unique value offering. And then the other one is expansion. So you may want to be going into new markets. I know when I was at Channel Advisor, we did an IPO, and my job was to make sure that we use that money to go into new markets. And one of the biggest challenges we had at that time was like, oh, hey, our product is ready to go to Germany. Our product is ready to go to France. We have operations, but we cannot support the customers in French or German. So a lot of our customers turn to us and say, hey, we need to go into new markets. And I'm going to tell you a story with some data in a minute about how you can expand really effortlessly into those new markets and to grow share, or to make sure that you're capitalizing on demand in those markets. And then replacement, sometimes you may have old ways of thinking about multilingual customer support, whether that is, live humans or just rethinking how you're going to support your customers. And so we can do that. And then, making sure that you can support your customers on any channel. And I think Brian talked a little bit about this at the beginning, is they want to select the channels that works for them. So whether it's real time or asynchronously, across chat, email, voice, making sure that you can think about support situations that fit that. So anything that either of you would add to that before I go to story time? All right.
There's a lot that we can add, but I think that story time is really where we're going to learn how we go from all these theories, all this data, to what it looks like. So we don't want to stand in the way of that.
Perfect. Well, we have a customer, and they wanted to go into Africa. And one of the things that if you don't know much about going into the African market, it is a really unique market. It has a young constituency, like the youngest population globally. And they wanted to compete directly with Netflix. And so to do that, they needed to be able to support the customers in those markets in their native language, and really start to take share from them. I'm having a hard time moving. So Gen Z typically likes to be on their phone, and they really appreciate streaming services. I talked a little bit about how the African market has the youngest median age. It is 19.7 years old, and that's just an anomaly. And I'm gonna we'll look at some other data and interesting. And then their urban centers are really burgeoning, so they wanted to really make sure that they were capitalizing on this market and these trends. And but before we move forward, in the chat, which country do you think, if Africa has continent has the lowest median age, which country do you think has the highest? Brian, what do you think?
I feel like I'd be cheating because I do know what's on the next slide. So I don't know.
What would you have guessed before?
For in Africa, for highest median age, I would probably have said, I don't know, like I would have just gone with an obvious one, like Morocco or something.
Well, it's actually Monaco, and it's not in Africa, but it's so fascinating. So to give you the context of how young the African market is, the median age in Monaco is 53 years old. In most of Europe, it's 42. So those are our extremes. But your little fun fact for today. And so here are the languages. Often, we don't really think about which languages you would need to support. And I know that we're talking about Africa as a continent, but they were thinking about as a total market. There are, 200 million Arabic speakers. There's English, there's Kiswahili, there's French, there's Sassal, and the Oromo. And you wanted to make sure that you could support all of those languages. And we were able to help our customer do that. And Showmax actually ended up stealing some market share from Netflix and became the leader in the space. And part of that had to do with the customer experience and making sure that, they were able to provide a unique experience from that subscription all the way to support that felt native and global. So there's the first one. And then the other one is Rainbow Railroad. And this is one of my favorite customers that we have. And it's really a security story. So if you don't know Rainbow Railroad, they are a not-for-profit that helps LGBTQIA plus people escape from state-sponsored violence. And making sure that those conversations and all of their data is secure is really imperative. And that's one reason that they turn to Language IO, is because we do not retain any data, so that we could make sure that those callers that were reaching out to Rainbow Railroad for help were not identified, and that they remain safe. So that is one thing that I'm the most proud of with Language IO. But in addition to making sure that we were protecting those callers that were maybe calling in Farsi, Pashto, Russian, Arabic, and making sure that those agents, could serve them anytime, because you never knew when these callers were going to have free time to reach out, and you wanted to make sure that they were able to get support at any given time. And we allowed Rainbow Railroad to actually do 5x their volume capacity and process these callers much more quickly, where it's actually imperative that they get their issue resolved quickly, and maintain that client confidentiality and security. and making sure that those experiences were human and empathetic and accurate across all of those languages was imperative. They did do a case study with us. I hope you'll read it on our website because it is one of my most proud things. And it's a really important organization, and I'm glad that we can support them. And the other thing is, with Language IO, you have one platform where you can do all of those things. You can manage multiple contact centers and make sure that you lower those facility costs, staffing costs, can actually support more customers more economically in a very human way and reduce all of that extra overhead. So those are my stories, and I know that we have tons more, so we'd love to tell those to you. Brian, Josh, anything else that you want to add before I just show that we do work across multiple industries, multiple size companies, and we're really proud of the customers that we get to serve.
I just think that was a great example of just the different use cases that can be solved with AI as it regards to language, and really great stories that you shared there, Sheridan.
And I think what's great about them is not only, we could look at the hard line. There's business benefits. There's metrics that improve. There's success there. But I think, Sheridan, the one you gravitated toward as well, when you think about the humanity behind it, and I think that's a good note to transition to these final takeaways here, is that at the end of the day, we're doing all this. We talk about how AI is a gateway to better humanity, not less humanity. We talk about innovating for the sake of building connections, not eliminating them. And this really speaks to that. When you think about the humans that are involved in this, what understanding them means, what listening to them means, what letting them be themselves and talk how they want means, that's how you start to show, hey, yeah, we're a brand, we're selling you something, we deliver products, but we're also an organization that wants to build for you and be one that you can rely upon and you can trust. We're one that wants to hear you. And that doesn't happen without that. It all starts with language. It all starts with that firm understanding. And so when we start to think about self-service channels, when we start to think about escalating to a live person, the most make or break factor is this brand the right brand for me? And how that's decided is this the brand, the one that actually cares about me, the one that listens to me, and the one that elevates itself based on what I need? So that, again, no matter what channel you're talking about, no matter what language they're speaking, no matter what the use case is, if you don't have the ability to let them speak how they want and communicate how they want to hear it, you're never going to build that connection. So I know that the two of you kind of put these takeaways together, so I'll pass it over to you to walk through all of them. But I wanted to preface it with that point because the humanity part is what's often lost in these conversations. And we all know we wouldn't be in this industry if that wasn't ultimately the thing we cared about most. So it can't be lost. It can't be forgotten. It needs to be central to any technology innovation.
Totally. And I think the first one is imperative, because it doesn't matter what technology you're using, what the efficiency you gain, if your customers don't have clarity and they aren't getting their issue resolved. And the other side of this coin is really your agents having clarity. Do they understand the customers? Because I can imagine that is the most frustrating thing, is to be really trying to help someone and not be able to understand them. So you need clarity on both sides, and you want a human experience on both sides. And so I think clarity is absolutely critical. And then, the businesses demand control. Like, is this a secure platform? Is this integrated into our existing systems? Is this a new workflow for our team? Is this a new tool? Language IO is really proud to stay inside of the tools that your agents are already working with, so that you have full control, but also to make sure that the models are not giving you inaccuracies or hallucinations, and that you have complete control. And then, this is the opportunity is here. AI is going to, I don't know if anybody remembers Good to Great. I always go back to that book. It was I think we all read it in the early 2000s. but it was talking about how great businesses are made. And one was to be quick to adopt technology. And that really can differentiate you from your competitors and make sure that you stay in solid footing in uncertain times, uncertain markets. And I think, embracing AI and really testing it and see what the capabilities are absolutely critical. And, Josh is an amazing researcher. And, I think the brand data research just reaffirms that, while we're cautiously approaching these types of solutions, the business imperative is there. And, but we all want to make sure it's accurate, governed, and like really built to connect and not divide. So I will leave it to either of you to give your closing thoughts. And I'd love to have questions from our attendees.
Yeah, that's great, Sharon. I think the last thing that I'll add is, we did a lot of research and we figured out, some of the barriers and the challenges. And ultimately, I think those same barriers and challenges from a technology perspective they have counterpoints on the customer experience side. And so when we talk about accuracy and fluency and real-time translation, it comes down to the difference between a good and a really great customer experience. Did they know what they were talking about when I asked them? Did they understand me, and could they communicate in a way that I understood? And did they resolve my problem in a quick fashion? I think those are the things that, almost universally, all good customer support organizations care about those types of things. And, the research that we undertook just supported that language is the key to providing some of those, good to great moments when it comes to customer experience. And so I think that was one of the last things I wanted to just mention is just, don't think about the data as just simply technology. Think about the data in terms of how the opportunities for AI actually translate into real improvements in customer experience.
Yeah, and so I have a lot that I can share, but I think you both summed it up really nicely. I do want to make sure we get to these questions. We have about 7 or 8 minutes left, so still time to get some questions in. But if anything runs off, I'm sure our speakers will be thrilled to follow up. But we have one here that is very timely, directly ties into the MIT study, and that is someone asking about the best way to really build a pilot program or a proof of concept that will help us scale. Obviously, the study you both referenced, the whole point there was that pilots have not been successful. So this person wants to know, what are some tips for making them more successful? Any recommendations that either of you have?
Yeah.
Sheridan, go ahead. Or you have something you want to lead with?
No, I want to hear what you have to say because you're always fascinating on this topic.
Well, I think from what I've seen from a lot of product managers that I've been speaking with is that the actual ability to get a prototype out there is now very much shifted away from a full engineering team into the product manager's hands directly. And so taking an LLM of choice and kind of working with different prompts to say, and then I wanted to do this, and then I wanted to do this, that often can be the building blocks of good product requirements documents. And those then can be turned into something, there's a term out there that a lot of people are hearing about, vibe coding, right? So a lot of these product managers are able to take these little pieces that they've started to kind of think about and vibe code a prototype of what they want to build. I think the whole process of building is going to still be fairly complicated, but I think the process of getting prototypes built and out there, I think we're at a phase where that's almost being democratized. And so product managers with a little bit of technology or some technical skills, some good AI skills, and some willingness to jump into the vibe coding pool, we're seeing a lot of great companies that are thriving, starting off with that mentality and then handing things over to engineering once those prototypes have been successful. It's not a perfect recipe for success, but I think that's we're at a day and age where anybody with a good idea can go a lot further with that to see if it's worth pursuing than we ever have been in the past.
Well, I think that is really good opportunity. One of the things that, I've been around tech for a long time, and I have seen all sorts of technology rolled out. But what can happen in situations where you have these great ideas is you can get scope creep. And then you forget which problem you were trying to solve. And so I think that what we see when people are being really effective and coming to our team is they have a sense of, how they will measure success, where their biggest pain is, and they have that kind of documented. And they're like, hey, we're starting to get a ton more calls from France, and those are in, time zones that we don't necessarily always support French. We'd love to work with you to see how we can improve that. And we do proof of concepts all the time. And our customer success team is especially capable, and they've seen so many of these projects. They can say, hey, we learned this from a company like yours. But I think going back to being really crystal clear about what you're trying to achieve, and then, picking the right vendors to help you in that journey. And I know, Josh, you're really good at the really innovative stuff, but I mean, this is a problem that almost every large business has. How do I support my global customers in their language? And you want to learn from people who've worked with, your peers. So I think that would be my answer. And, we'd love to talk to anybody about challenges.
Yeah, I think that combination of really kind of considering all the angles, really looking at what's worked and what hasn't worked, and then most importantly, understanding what matters, what you're trying to achieve and what those cases are, that's a recipe for success. Now, we probably have time for two more. And I know that this person, I appreciate them sticking with CCW Digital. This person asked a very similar question that we didn't get to for a recent webinar, but luckily we have two great speakers who can get to it now. And that is the notion of empathy. So, we're talking a lot about language and communication on this webinar. And so this person's asking, to what extent can empathy be achieved, within an AI-driven set of communication? Is it possible in self-service? Do we have to redefine it? What do both of you think about the role of empathy when it comes to an increasingly AI-powered world?
I think you have to have empathy because, we're not just talking about self-service, we're talking about the relationship with the agent. But one of the great things about AI is it can take off all of those mundane, really repetitive tasks that actually keep your agents from being humane and empathetic because they're so busy trying to think about like, hey, does this go in this screen? What fields do I need to fill out? Oh my gosh, did I check the price guarantee match? And they lose the ability to be empathetic in the workflow. And if we can automate through agentic AI, through, taking the stress of making sure that you're, trying to support a customer in a language that you don't speak, that allows them to really have those conversations and do what they do best. And the reason that they got into customer support, which is, serving customers. So I think the more that we can automate, use AI, the more space we give humans to be human. And, AI is getting so much better at sounding human. ChatGPT is my therapy, but it really is human. And I hope I don't end up with being one of those people that takes it out to dinner with me. But I think that as language continues to evolve, as the models learn, it can be more empathetic, but ultimately freeing up humans to be human is what I'm the most excited about.
We saw recently that half the internet revolted against ChatGPT when they moved from 4.0 to 5 because they said that some of the personality was removed, and people had come to really appreciate that personality. And so I think it's inevitable that the AI agents out there are going to be trainable to the point where they can match your brand standards, they can match your customer support rules and processes and all of those different things. And I feel like that's something where people who are interested in an excellent customer experience should continue to invest in adopting AI because it's just going to get better and better. And as the models get better at being empathetic, and as you free up that time for your team to be, the humans that they are, you'll get that perfect combination to unlock a better experience.
What I would also add is that my take is that empathy is really, it's more of a design process. When you're designing that journey, you want to be designing that from the perspective of what's going to matter to the customer. So looking at, okay, in this use case, what's the priority? Is the priority accuracy, speed? Is it sympathy? Is it emotional kind of, or trying to make an emotional bond? When you design your journeys that way, you can deploy AI for what it does best and what humans do best. And so, the truth is, like, we sometimes mistake empathy for that really like emotionally, deep, intimate conversation with a lot of apologizing, a lot of really connecting with them on a personal level. AI can get there, and it's showing signs of being better at that than it was previously. But odds are that's still what you're going to want to have your humans doing, because they can put themselves in that customer's shoes. They can really understand what this means. If, however, in that moment, the customer doesn't really care how nice or apologetic you are, they just want to make their next flight and they're worried that they're not going to change it quickly. The empathetic thing is to do that quickly. That's where a very well-trained, well-developed AI tool can be a lot more effective than asking someone to wait on hold to make the change. So the empathy part comes not so much purely in the conversation, but actually in the way you design that journey and where you determine, should this be automated, should this be human-led? Over time, the lines will probably blur to where we're more impressed with how empathetic AI can be. And therefore, also, we're more impressed by how fast humans can be, because to Sheridan's point, they have a lot less on their plate. And so the lines will blur where maybe you'll have more optionality. But in the short term, decide what's going to matter to a customer for this intent and give them the option that best supports that. That is your brand being empathetic. Don't break it out based on the agent. Don't break it out based on the conversation. Break it out based on the way you've designed your experience to accommodate what the customer needs. And they'll always have the access to the best outcome. You'll always be moving in the right direction. So I like that a lot. So we have a little past time here. I want to give each of our speakers just one chance, because Sheridan, you brought up the point about use cases and kind of setting a priority. So one of the questions we had was, if you had to just pick one use case to start with, what's the highest impact win? If each of you could maybe just share a very quick answer to wrap us up with where your head might be on that question.
I mean, I think that the use case really depends on your business needs, but I think consolidation is really important, because, and it's not just consolidation of operations, but it's making sure that any agent can support any customer at any given time. And that takes the load off of certain agents. For instance, you may have a high volume of Spanish-speaking customers, but you have Nordic speakers who do not have the same level of occupancy or utilization. If you can smooth that out, you may take some of the stress off of certain people and distribute it appropriately, and making sure that, and if you do that, that reduces handle time for customers. So I would think that you want to, just look at where your pain is, and we'd love to help you and, share our stories. And, but I think, looking at where you can consolidate and smooth out operations is really critical.
Yeah, I would add to that. I would just say, based on the study that we performed, the data suggests it's real-time translation. And I think that translates into a number of different customer service outcomes, including your first contact resolution rates, your handle time, and other really important KPIs that lead to ultimately the types of outcomes that we're looking for.
And why I like that is because when you're focusing on translation, you're focusing on making something you're doing right now better. You're not experimenting with like uncharted territory where, is automation going to completely backfire for this type of issue? Or is our existing script in no way equipped for this? You're basically saying, we know that we have the general idea of what service looks like down for this issue, but we just can't make that language work for everyone. So let's try to democratize what's already working, and then we could start to see real impact on more customers being understood, more customers being satisfied, more customers becoming long-term advocates for the brand. So I think that's a very great approach there. But again, I think we can all talk about our use case. I think Sheridan's point is the number one thing, which is talk to people who know what goes into a great language communication services, what goes into a great translation, what goes into customer understanding. Let them figure out how they can make an impact on your business, make it better for your customers, make it better for your employees, and you're going to be moving in the right direction. Well, we are past the hour mark, so I want to thank Brand Data and Language.io, and of course, Josh and Sheridan for their amazing insights here. Thanks to all of you for your participation, your commitment to making customer understanding a critical priority for your business. And of course, if you haven't yet gotten your certificate, you should be able to download it right from the console. If you're having any trouble, definitely follow up with us via email. We'll make sure you get that because we really do appreciate your commitment to this industry. And we want the world to know that you've taken that step to better understanding your customers, better empowering your employees, and really achieving bottom line growth in the age of AI. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.